Welcome to the League of Women Voters Candidate Forum for the Illinois House of Representatives 41st District. This event is being recorded. The Naperville League is proud to present tonight's candidate forum in partnership with the League of Women Voters of Wheaton. I am Susan Craighead, President of the League of Women Voters of Naperville. The League is a nonpartisan organization. We do not support or oppose candidates for public office. You can rely on the League to present fair and civil candidate forums where each candidate is allowed an equal chance to respond. Election Day 2022 is only a few short weeks away. Now is the time to make your plan for how you will cast your vote safely and securely on or before Tuesday, November 8th. We hope that part of your plan is to educate yourself on the candidates and issues in order to confidently vote the whole ballot. In addition to watching candidate forums live or recorded, you may also find candidate information on vote411.org, our nonpartisan online voter guide. All candidates have been invited to respond to questions, and their answers appear complete and unedited. A video of this candidate forum will be linked to Vote 411. And now let me introduce our moderator for tonight, Carol Tidwell. Carol?
Thanks, Susan. And welcome everyone to the candidate forum for the Illinois 41st General Assembly House 2020 election. As she said, it is being sponsored tonight by the Naperville and Wheaton chapters of the League. Thanks also to the audience who is seeing this live on Zoom and Facebook or watching a recording. My name is Carol Tidwell, and I have been trained by the League to conduct candidate forums. I do not live or vote in the 41st General Assembly House District. We're following League rules for the forum tonight. After opening statements by the candidates, I will ask a number of questions that were prepared by the sponsors and which were not provided to the candidates ahead of time. Since this is a forum and not a debate, I ask that the candidates direct their statements and responses to the audience and not to each other. As per forum rules, the candidates will not use their cell phones or other electronic devices during the forum when answering questions. Please understand that the League of Women Voters is not responsible for verifying the accuracy of the statements that candidates make during this forum. The candidates will each have 3 minutes to present an opening statement in turn, and up to 3 minutes to respond to each question again in turn. At the end of the forum, they will each have 3 minutes to make a closing statement. Our timekeeper will keep us on track in the interests of time and fairness to each candidate. I ask the candidates to watch the screen as you are speaking. Time reminders will appear at 1 minute, 30 seconds, 15 seconds, and finally, a stop sign. The candidate speaking should wind down at the 15-second warning and stop speaking when the stop sign appears, although I will allow a couple of extra words so you can complete your sentence, but please, no compound sentences. We want to get in as many questions as we can and give the same amount of time to both candidates. The candidates will be asked to speak in alphabetical order, and we will rotate who has the chance to be first to answer a question. We're going to get started, so both candidates should now come onto the screen. I ask that you keep yourself muted until it is your turn to speak. Candidate Janner, you'll be first to give your opening statement, and you have 3 minutes.
Carol, thank you. And I'd like to thank the League of Women Voters for hosting this forum. Again, I'm Rich Janner, currently your Naperville Park District Commissioner, and now candidate for state representative in the 41st District. I have 3 school-aged children, ages 3, 5, and 12, and my campaign is dedicated to a safer and more prosperous future for them. I was first elected Naperville Park District Commissioner in 2011, was reelected in 2015 and 2019, and was elected president of the board 3 times by a unanimous bipartisan vote of the other commissioners, which points to my ability to work well with anyone. I'm also a longtime business owner, 20-year high school varsity baseball coach, and author. First and foremost, I stand for public safety, supporting law enforcement, and repealing the disastrous Safety Act. Watching the defund the police movement unfold here in our district in 2020 is what motivated me to get more involved. I also stand for knocking down taxes and inflation, parents' rights, and meaningful ethics reform so that the reign of now indicted Speaker Madigan can never be replicated in any elected office, and the culture of corruption within my opponent's party can be put to rest permanently. My opponent has repeatedly demonstrated a cavalier attitude towards everyday citizens, voting for legislator pay raises during a pandemic, while many of her constituents were dealing with pay cuts, lost jobs, furloughs, and shuttered businesses. I call on her tonight to justify that vote to all of us at some point during the forum. My opponent also voted to decriminalize deadly heroin, crack, meth, and fentanyl, continuing an alarming trend of putting drug dealers and criminals ahead of law-abiding citizens. I call on her tonight to justify that vote to all of us during this forum. Finally, despite adamant opposition from the Will County State's Attorney, a prominent Democrat, and the DuPage County State's Attorney, a Republican, along with a coalition of leaders from both political parties, my opponent refuses to publicly oppose the Safety Act. I call on her to publicly oppose it tonight during this forum. This is the #1 issue in our district right now by most accounts, and we deserve to hear from her on this. My campaign mantra is rediscover common sense. I encourage everyone to visit richjanner.com for more information, and I look forward to your questions this evening. Thank you.
Thank you. Candidate Yang Rohr, please give your opening statement.
Thank you, Carol. I am State Representative Janet Yang Rohr. I represent Illinois' 41st District, which is comprised mostly of Naperville and parts of Warrenville. In 2023, it will also include parts of Bolingbrook. This is a community where my husband and I, we both grew up here. We are raising our 3 young kids here, and now they're going to some of the same schools that I went to, and they have some of the same teachers that I had. Now, I have been in the investment industry for most of the last 20 years. I am the Director of Multi-Asset and Alternatives Research at Morningstar. My job at Morningstar is to stand up for savers, to stand up for retirees, and to make sure that workers can truly retire with dignity. As state representative, I have taken my business background, I have put it to work in Springfield. In the last 2 years that I've been here, we have cut billions of dollars from our pension liabilities. We have cut our interest payments, we have cut our late fees because we are finally paying our bills in Illinois. We've done it while investing in areas that make a real difference for our community. We have invested in our public schools and universities, in infrastructure, in our economy and businesses, and in green jobs. There is so much more that we have to do. And I am thankful that we live in a state that respects the rights of women to make their own healthcare decisions. But now our neighboring states all around us are attacking our doctors and healthcare workers. They're making it harder for our residents in our very district to get the healthcare that they need. We need to also pass common sense gun safety laws that the overwhelming majority of us support, and that prevent tragedies like the ones we saw at the elementary school in Uvalde, Texas, and the 4th of July parade in Highland Park, Illinois. And after a harrowing 2 years for students and for educators, we need to make sure that we are supporting our teachers, our children, our schools, so that they have the tools that they need to thrive. We need to support our businesses and our economy. We need to make sure, especially that Illinois is the nation's hub for green jobs and green manufacturing. There is just so much we have to do. if I am fortunate enough to be reelected by our community, I will continue to fight hard to make sure that we are making progress along all of these fronts.
Thank you. All right, we'll move on to questions now. You'll each have up to 3 minutes to give your response. And the first question goes to you, candidate Yang Rohr. And it is this: in building a vibrant state economy, what policies would you prioritize?
Now, one of my top priorities is absolutely to support our business community and support our economy. We're doing that a few ways. At the very ground level, I make sure to talk with our businesses, talk with our small businesses, talk with our chambers of commerce to make sure to understand what they need and what kind of support they need from the state. So for example, one of the things that I heard very recently was they needed some help with the recently passed tax holiday that happened in August. So with our local businesses, I met with them and we wrote legislation and introduced legislation to provide tax amnesty to them so that they can continue to have more transparency and more reliability in how to conduct their businesses. Now, making sure that our businesses and our economies are supported, it is a multifaceted issue. And there are so many things that go into it, so many things that I'm sure that we're going to go into in this forum. It means making sure that people actually want to be here and that this is a state that supports people's rights. It makes sure that we are protecting women's rights and reproductive rights, for example. When we have businesses like Google, like Facebook, like Uber that say that they can't run businesses where states don't protect and don't respect women's rights, that's when we know that we have to focus on those issues. We cannot sweep those under the rugs. We have to make sure that we're protecting women's rights. We have to make sure that people feel safe in Illinois. And that means protecting good gun violence protection legislation, making sure that we are controlling the violence and making sure that we are putting criminals away that need to be put away. On a larger scale and a longer term horizon, we need to make sure we're making the right investments so that people can come to Illinois and make sure that their kids are being educated, that they have great public schools, that we continue to support a good public university system, a good vocational school system, and community college system. These are all things that I have fought for while I've been in Springfield, making sure that we are funding these priorities.
Thank you. And let me just say for both candidates that if either of you ever need me to repeat a question, I'm happy to do that. Okay, candidate Janner, that first question is to you now.
Thank you. So I think first and foremost, we need to stop driving residents and businesses out of the state. And I think if we do that, we can achieve some organic revenue growth. Since Governor Pritzker has been in office, Illinoisans have been hit with 24 tax and fee hikes. And this is just punishing on our residents and our businesses. So as it applies to business, we need to get back to a pro-business approach. Also, I think we need to take a hard look at inflation. If you see what's going on with grocery prices and gas prices, I think we need relief in both areas. And those areas are particularly impactful for lower income residents that spend a higher percentage of their income on necessities such as gas and groceries. Next, I think we need to look at public safety and take care of some of the crime that we have, frankly, spilling in from Chicago out into our district and in the suburbs. I feel strongly that keeping residents safe is the #1 job or role of any government agency. And unless a person, especially a young person, can feel safe in their home, in their school, in their neighborhood and community, that person cannot reach their full potential. So those would be some of the things I would start with. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, the next question goes to you first, candidate Janner. What policies will you pursue to promote social and racial justice in our state?
Yeah, so first of all, I think every resident of our district every resident of our country for that matter, deserves our utmost respect. And every resident should have the right and the ability to live the life they want to choose and to pursue their dreams. And that's very important. As a high school baseball coach for the last 20 years, I have brought together people from all different backgrounds and all walks of life. And I think we need to keep these principles and their constitutional rights in mind at all times. Thank you.
Candidate Yang Rohr, that question to you now.
I want to make sure that every voice is heard in our district, in my community. And so we can make sure that we are pursuing this racial and this social equity and justice that you mentioned in various different ways. One of the ways that we made sure to do it in the past 2 years, in my first year actually in office, was to pass the Teaching Equitable Asian American History Act. The TEACH Act makes sure that in our public schools, we are teaching about the contributions of Asian Americans. And I am so proud to have been a driving force in passing that, and passing that with strong bipartisan support. We made sure that we are respecting so many voices and so many different cultures in our great state. That means, for example, passing legislation that will help those with from a Muslim background to wear the headscarves or the the uniforms that work for them and work for their culture. I'm proud to sponsor legislation that makes sure that the African American people with their hairstyles will also be respected, because there have been too many instances where, frankly, our schools sometimes did not respect that. And it's by talking with our students, again, talking with our community members, that I can understand like what they are going through, what are the issues that they need our help on. Right now, I'm proud to work with the Muslim community, because they told me that in their schools, in our high schools, in our elementary schools, when they go to get their lunches, their school lunches, they don't have the halal school options and the food options that they need to keep with their religious requirements. Same thing with kosher foods. A lot of times students just don't have options in our schools. And so I am so proud to be able to work with these students, to work with our community members, to make sure that we are respecting their needs and doing what we can at the state level to make sure that they feel respected and to further their culture and their needs.
Thank you. The next question is first to you, Candidate Yang Rohr, and it is this. Do you believe that reproductive rights should be under the jurisdiction of the state or federal government?
I believe that it is a huge tragedy that our federal government has absolutely abdicated their duty to protect reproductive rights. And unlike my opponent, I am unapologetically pro-choice. If we don't continue to fight for our rights here in Illinois, our rights can slip away. And so the Supreme Court, they're overturning a Roe v. Wade. It was heartbreaking to me. It was heartbreaking to so many in our district. I am thankful that I live in a state that respects women's rights to make their own healthcare decisions and doesn't have state-sanctioned forced pregnancies. Now, the good thing is Illinois passed the reproductive health right. And when that happened, many people accused those legislators of alarmism. They said that they were wasting time, that these were already established federal precedents. Now, I wasn't in the legislature at the time, but I am sure glad that I had legislators like Senator Ellman to represent me and who had the foresight to protect those rights. They protected the rights so that my daughters will never have to carry a pregnancy against their will. I am so proud to be sponsored by Planned Parenthood, by Personal PAC, and by the National Organization of Women. These are organizations that understand that this fight doesn't end here. You're going to hear from my opponent. You're going to hear a nominally passive, but what is an incredibly insidious response about Illinois abortion laws, that they're not going to change, that there's nothing to worry about. But that response willfully ignores what is happening on the ground and in our very own district. because we have surrounding states all around us in Missouri, in Tennessee, in Indiana, that are trying to punish our doctors and our healthcare workers. We have wait times in our district that are going into from days to weeks. And when you have to wait 2 weeks or 3 weeks, the consequences can just become catastrophic for a patient. And so I want you to remember, for all that are listening, remember that when my opponent says that there's nothing that he can do to change or affect reproductive rights in Illinois, take him at his word. He can't do anything because he won't do anything to help our constituents. He won't do anything to help the constituents that are coming to my office every day, telling me their heartbreaking stories, and he won't do anything to protect their rights.
Thank you. Candidate Janner, that question to you now, please.
Thank you. Yeah, so to answer your original question, I think the state government, the federal government, and the Supreme Court all have a role to play. And obviously, a lot of responsibility was recently pushed back into the state government. And I certainly acknowledge that this is an emotionally charged issue within our district. I fully understand that. And so I would like to clarify for anybody that is listening, the recent Supreme Court decision overturning Roe v. Wade does not change anything here in Illinois, period. Illinois remains one of the most permissive states in the country for abortion. In fact, as Representative mentioned, we are a destination for abortion for all residents from all of our neighboring states. Given our political climate and our current structure in the state, the odds of this changing are almost zero. The area of the law, however, that does need to be addressed, that is way too extreme and out of sync with our district, is parental notification. As a high school baseball coach, I work with student athletes 15, 16, sometimes 17 years old. If one of those student athletes has a headache and I need to administer that young person an aspirin, I need to get parental permission. The legislation that my opponent and her party are apparently advocating for was passed is that if a minor, a 12 or 13-year-old child wants to have an abortion, she can do that without parental consent or parental notification. Again, way too extreme for our district, and I don't think that is in sync with our district. So I think we need to focus on this parental notification issue as it applies to unemancipated minors. Thank you.
Thank you. Next question goes to you, Candidate Janner, first, and it is this. What steps would you take to collaborate with legislators of another party to pass legislation important to your constituents?
Well, I've always been a person that wants to hear all voices. The title of my book is We Not Me in Sports, Business, and Life. And in that book is numerous anecdotes of how people of all different walks of life could get together for common good. One of the issues we have in Springfield right now with the supermajority party, as I'm told from Republican colleagues, is Republican colleagues are often not listened to at all. We have votes that are passed in the middle of the night. We had a bill that was over 700 pages long that was passed in the middle of the night without appropriate dialogue from both chambers. So we absolutely have to build bridges. And I think, as I've done in my campaign, we have to attack issues and focus on issues and not attack people. And so we need to put people ahead of politics. And again, a focus on the issue and not any focus on personal attacks. Thank you.
Thank you. Candidate Yang Rohr, that question to you now.
Thank you, Carol. You know, the partisan divide that is really just cleaving our country, and it's one of really the most concerning issues that we're facing today. When everything is framed as us versus them, it's no wonder that there's so much vitriol among us. Now, during this 102nd General Assembly, so this is the General Assembly that I'm a part of, my fellow representatives and we have taken almost 2,000 floor votes on bills. So almost 70% of these, they passed unanimously with not one Democrat or Republican voting nay. And the reason why that happens is because when we do the real work of representing our districts, representing our communities, we make the practical, the necessary legislation that really helps our communities. These are the schools, the hospitals, and the businesses, to name a few, that are part of our community, and we help them to function better with this legislation. These are non-controversial votes that nevertheless take diligent work from many stakeholders to pass. And almost every single one of the bills that I pass in my 2 years in office have either been passed unanimously or passed with strong bipartisan support. And when we say that record, it doesn't happen by accident. It happens because I work with stakeholders and I work with my colleagues on both sides of the aisle to get work done for our district.
Thank you. Next question is first to you, candidate Yang Rohr, and it's this. Do you support the recently passed voluntary standards for sex education in K through 12 schools? Why or why not?
I voted for the recently passed bill that you mentioned. And so let me tell you a little bit about that bill. In its first iteration, it was basically a mandate on our schools. I had concerns with that, and so did the school districts in my district. And so I worked closely with them, and I made sure to bring that voice to our Democratic caucus, to the bill sponsors, to make sure that they heard that voice. And as a result, we changed it so that it became no longer a mandate, but a may instead of a shall. And so these sex ed standards, they are the national sex ed standards that if you looked before this bill was passed, before this bill was even existed, it was already on the Illinois School Board Education website. It was already one of the resources that schools all over Illinois were already using. And so what was passed, basically, we are already doing it, and we are already doing it. Now, I have heard a lot of just outright misinformation about this, some really actually gross stuff. I have a second grader, and I have a fifth grader, I have a seventh grader, and some of the things that they were saying are being taught are just completely untrue. For a kindergartner, for a first grader, for a second grader, just like my little second grader, what they're teaching is age appropriate material. Things like what is good touch, what is bad touch, things that our kids should know, because there are too many predators out there, and our kids should know how to stand up for themselves. And this is what the curriculum, these are what the standards teach. I am absolutely dismayed as to the misinformation that's been out there. And to think that we would actually have what some of these Facebook posts are showing is just frankly awful. So I supported this bill. I supported this legislation because it's good legislation. It's their learning standards that were already being taught.
Thank you. That question to you now, candidate Jenner.
Thank you, Carol. I'm opposed, and the reason I'm opposed is very simple. The primary place for sex education should be between a parent and the child, either in their living room or at their kitchen table. This is the realm of the family unit within the household, and inside that classroom, we should be focused on academics. Young people have so much moving in their headspace. They got so many different things they're thinking about, and putting some of this curriculum, it's unnecessary, it's inappropriate, and again, it should be dealt with at the kitchen table between parents and children. And also, as it stands, it opens up introducing partisan politics, depending on who happens to be in power at any given time, partisan politics into that classroom situation. I had the privilege of teaching at the high school level for a couple of years, and a full-time and then a part-time basis. So I know what it's like to be in a classroom, that sacred space. And now certainly all the other services that come around in a school, you have the resource officers, you got counselors, you got wraparound services, all of that stuff is great. But when you're in that classroom, it should be a sacred place where you're focused on academics and not any kind of partisan agenda. And again, kitchen table, living room, family, that's where sex education should be taught. Thank you.
Thank you. The next question goes first to you, candidate Janner. What, if any, changes would you make to the Safety Act?
So, the Safety Act is an absolute disaster, as I mentioned in my opening remarks. Let's focus on a couple of the worst elements of it. First, as was mentioned earlier, passed in the middle of the night, over 700 pages. Did every legislator read it? How could that possibly happen? Was consensus built with the law enforcement community? No, it was railroaded past the law enforcement community, which is why, again, as I mentioned in my opening remarks, you have bipartisan opposition to the Safety Act. As far as to get to your direct question, as far as the worst elements of it, eliminating cash bail. How demoralizing would it be for a police officer who would arrest somebody, have that person go to jail, and then have that person released before the ink is even dry on the police report? And let's talk about some of the types of crimes that we're talking about. Aggravated battery, burglary, intimidation, kidnapping, robbery, murder in the second degree, threatening a public official, which both Representative Yang-Rohr and myself are. Way, way, way too extreme, way too crazy. When January 1st hits, are we really going to release these people out onto the streets of Wheaton, in DuPage County or in Will County or wherever we are? Makes absolutely no sense. Absolutely no sense. Flies in the face of common sense. Secondly, trespassing. Okay. So, Carol, if someone goes into your house or my house for whatever reason, maybe they're on drugs, maybe they're drunk, maybe they're just wandering around the neighborhood, comes into your house or my house or anybody's house, sits down in your living room, starts watching TV. And as a homeowner, I say, hey, get out of here. And the person refuses to leave. The sheriff's department cannot remove that person from my home. They can issue them a ticket. This makes absolutely no sense. It completely flies in the face of common sense. And the Safety Act must absolutely be repealed. And I will continue to be a champion to fight against it until it is repealed. Thank you.
Thank you. That question now to you, candidate Yang-Rohr.
It is incredibly disappointing, but maybe not surprising to hear my opponent repeat the lies that have been debunked over and over again. So let me tell you, I have talked with our local law enforcement, our Naperville Police Chief, for example. And one of the things that is so striking to me when we talk about the Safety Act is how much Naperville has already implemented of the Safety Act. Things like body cameras, like de-escalation training, like using social workers. We are incredibly fortunate to live in this community where we are already light years ahead of so much of the rest of the state. What the Safety Act does, it brings those high standards that we enjoy here to the rest of the state. And that's so important because we don't stay in this community. We travel to other places and we want that high quality that we enjoy here. We want it in other places wherever we go. Now, there's a lot of misleading information out there, one of which is the no cash portion of the Safety Act, which we just talked about. Let me be totally clear. No cash bail, it doesn't mean that you just get to go out on bail and that they're just going to release criminals. What it does mean is that no matter how much money you have, no matter how much wealth you have, you cannot go on bail if you are a flight risk or if you are a threat to society. This, let's be totally clear. I want everyone to understand this. This is a system that has been in place at our federal level since 1984. And this is the same system that is used in our military courts. The Safety Act and the Pretrial Fairness Act, these were changes that were fundamentally transforming our criminal system. It makes our laws fairer, it makes our communities safer, and people who are charged with crimes, they will be detained based on whether or not they pose a risk or a flight risk, and not whether they have enough money. Now, police will issue citations, they will not make arrests for petty offenses, so they can focus on actually solving serious crimes, and people can avoid those long-term consequences of these very low-level mistakes. These are structural transformations that are going to make our system better, they're going to make them fairer, they're going to make them safer, and I am proud of that work. Now, I actually wasn't part of this vote, but I have certainly been part of addressing issues that come up with bills that are this big. And so I have been talking with law enforcement very regularly, and there are definitely issues that we need to fix, things that we need to change. I have already sponsored and voted for and supported trailer bills that address a lot of those issues. And we're going to do another one in November. As we prepare to implement the changes that I'm talking about, I'm getting feedback from law enforcement and other stakeholders. I'm making sure that those changes go through. I am representing our district. I'm proud of the Democrats for leading the way on keeping our communities safer.
Thank you. All right, the next question goes first to you, candidate Yang Rohr. What do you think the future of energy looks like in Illinois?
Well, I am proud to have supported Illinois' nation-leading Climate and Equitable Jobs Act. So this was passed in 2021, last year, and I spent most of my first 6 months in office directly negotiating with stakeholders on CEJA. One of the big things that we were negotiating was a date-certain closure of the dirty coal plants that power Naperville's electricity supply. Now, I had to spend so much of my time focusing on this because of the Naperville City Council of 2007. They made the very unfortunate decision to become an owner of the Prairie State Energy Campus. It is one of the highest polluting coal power plants in the country. And while that's becoming more and more known to people in our community, lots of people I talk with still don't know that they don't realize that you and I, almost every single one of us in Naperville, are part owners of one of the largest coal plants in the nation. So if there was any doubt to people listening as to why local elections and local municipal elections matter, Naperville's electricity and power situation is just a perfect example of that. So, there's a time and a place to reflect on the mistakes of the past, but my job as your representative has to make sure that we're looking forward and that we're making all the changes to make sure that our future is brighter, cleaner, and more sustainable. And so I worked very closely with city management and with leaders in Naperville so that CEJA will allow our city in Naperville to responsibly unwind from those arrangements. And as we continue to look to the future, one of our most critical tasks will be to make sure that we are cementing Illinois' place as the go-to hub for the green economy and for green jobs. Now, CEJA set the stage. It ensured that we have a reliable source of power through our nuclear fleet. It makes sure that we are continuing to grow solar and wind and other renewable energy sources. I also supported the Reimagining Electric Vehicle Act. And that makes sure that we are bringing to Illinois high-paying green manufacturing jobs in the electric vehicle sectors. So that means not only those car builders, but also all the component parts that surround it. And it's legislation like this. It's building a welcoming business community, bringing those highly skilled workforces that allowed Rivian to manufacture its electric trucks here. It brought Lions Electric Company and its electric buses here. And it continues to bring all those marquee names to Illinois. The future is green, and we are making sure that Illinois is front and center to allow us to prosper and to drive environmental sustainability.
Thank you. That question to you now, candidate Janner.
Thank you, Carol. Yeah, as a Naperville Park District Commissioner for over 10 years, we are constantly thinking about the environment, green initiatives, recycling, LEED certification for our new buildings. And as I mentioned earlier, with 3 young children under the age of 13, certainly want to leave our environment and our world a better place than what we found. Anytime you get into something, you want to leave it better than you found it. And so a couple thoughts on that. Here's what I know. As far as base load energy production, we need to keep that in place, and we need to continue to make sure that we produce power at a constant rate. We have to power our homes, we have to power our businesses, manufacturing plants, hospitals, and other critical places. I think most reasonable people in our district would find the rolling brownouts and blackouts we see in places like California to be unacceptable. So short term, I think we need to keep both renewable and non-renewable energy in play. And I do think that we can have it both ways. We can be environmentally conscious, we can be environmentally friendly without creating an undue burden on our taxpayers and of course on our businesses. And also I would be remiss if I didn't point out that nationwide, the US carbon footprint has decreased since the mid 2000s considerably, but that's due to technology and not due to heavy-handed mandates and legislation. Thank you.
Thank you. Candidate Janner, this next question is to you first. What, if any, additional gun safety legislation would you support?
So I absolutely think we need a comprehensive violence prevention strategy that keeps guns out of the hands of dangerous people while at the same time protects Second Amendment rights. As I mentioned with the previous question, I think we can have it both ways, and I think we can do both. First and foremost, we need to get guns, illegal guns, out of the hands of people that shouldn't have them. Tens of thousands of people in Illinois have a revoked FOID card, but still have guns. This is a big problem. If memory serves, the Chicago Sun-Times reported that it was 20,000 people that have a revoked FOID card, but still have a gun. So we need to get those guns out of the hands of the people that shouldn't have it. And we need to make sure our police have the resources in terms of both funding and support to get these guns off the street. And in talking with numerous members of law enforcement, this is one of the most difficult things a police officer has to do, is go in and get an illegal gun. If you think about that exercise, how dangerous, it's a very, very dangerous mission. So we need to make sure our police officers have the resources and the training, and we have enough police officers to do that. The next element of it would be technology. One of the things that I've learned is that a number of people that commit crimes, especially gun crimes, they tip those crimes off on social media or on some electronic platform before it happens. So we need to make sure, again, our police officers and our police departments have the technology resources to figure out that those crimes are happening and proactively prevent those crimes. And then finally, I support local control and local government. As everyone probably knows, our Naperville City Council wrestled with this issue. We had numerous people make a public comment. So I support local control in this matter, local agents of government, again, taking public comment, wrestling with these issues, and making decisions locally that are in the best interest of their constituents. Thank you.
Thank you. That question now to you, candidate Yang Rohr.
Carol, the Highland Park and the Uvalde shootings, they were absolutely heart-wrenching. They were tragic. And no parent, no family member should ever have to worry about being gunned down when they're going to a parade or sending their children to school. Except that's exactly what's happening. And that's what too many people, too many parents, too many people like me, like the people, my neighbors that I talk with, that's what they have to think about when they walk their kids to school and when they drop them off to school and watch them go into the building. So in the past year, we have passed legislation to strengthen extreme risk laws. We have passed legislation to fund the firearm owners identification process backlog and to fund the Illinois State Police so that they can better carry out the laws that are already on our books. I am sponsoring an assault weapons ban and a ban on high capacity ammunition magazines. And I'm supporting toughening penalties on adults who allow their firearms to fall into the wrong hands. I'm so proud to be endorsed by the Gun Violence Prevention PAC. I'm proud to be recognized as a gun sense candidate by Moms Demand Action. What my opponent didn't tell you about himself is that while I'm working every day to keep our children safe from this senseless gun violence, he and his supporters continue to put the NRA agenda ahead of our family safeties. His allies, they are pocketing money. They're pocketing campaign cash from the NRA and gun manufacturers, and then they're voting to eliminate restrictions on military-style assault rifles. They are voting against stronger background checks, and they're voting to make it easier to let dangerous criminals bring guns into our schools. There is just too much at stake in this election, and I will never stop fighting for our families, for our children. And I am committed to supporting and advancing legislation to keep Illinois families and communities safe from gun violence.
Thank you. The next question is first to you, candidate Yang Rohr, and it's this. How do you determine what donations and endorsements you accept?
Carol, my campaign is funded. I am so fortunate that it is funded by the firefighters, the nurses, the teachers, the workers that keep our economy going. I, every single day, thank them for their generosity, but really, I thank them for trusting in me to advance their needs, their issues. Because the thing is, they don't, otherwise, they don't have the other party, they're just not doing it for them. And so my campaign is funded by, again, those teachers, those nurses, the workers. They are funded by thousands at this point, thousands of individual donors that come from our district. I am so grateful for their support and for their trust in me. And I'm going to keep working on their behalf to make sure that we are advancing our state on behalf of all of them.
Thank you. Candidate Janner, that question to you now.
Yeah, Carol, I'm glad you brought this question up. In the year 2020 and the period leading up to that, my opponent and her party, according to the Illinois Sunshine website and some other sources, brought in nearly $3 million to win that office. And I hate to say it, but when you bring in that much money from special interest groups and outside the district, there are going to be strings attached. And the fact that my opponent has been a rubber stamp vote for her party leaders and these special interest groups a very high percentage of the time makes that all add up. $3 million. If you think about what somebody could do with $3 million, it's absolutely off the charts. Conversely, most of the checks that I have received, most of the donations I have received have been from people right here within our district. And that is very well documented. I would encourage anybody to check it out. You got to follow the money, and it all starts to add up. So thank you.
Thank you. Candidate Janner, this next question is to you first. Do you believe that LGBTQ rights are adequately addressed by state law? Why or why not?
Yeah, I think we can do a better job. I think we can do more in this area. As I stated previously, I firmly believe that every one of our citizens is deserving of our respect, and every one of our citizens should have the right to lead the lifestyle they want to lead and have the freedom to pursue their dreams. I mentioned that earlier, and I feel very strongly about that. And obviously, this issue has been increasing in the last couple of years. So, any votes that I take regarding this issue will have what I just said in mind, and will have a common sense approach as far as implementation as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Candidate Yang Rohr, that question to you, please.
Illinois has made great strides here. We can always do better. I am proud to have the endorsement of Equality Illinois and in joining their fight to make sure that we have equal treatment and full acceptance of the LGBTQ community. We need programs that specifically serve our LGBTQ individuals, like school counseling, resources to meet their needs like social services, funding HIV and AIDS services so that they have access to the treatment that they need. These are basic human rights, and it still shocks me when our representatives don't support them. Let me tell you about a group here in our very own district, a group which fully backs my opponent. Awake Illinois has over and over again shown that they are so willing to attack LGBTQ rights. When my opponent accepts their backing, He is telling you what he prioritizes. He is telling you who he will fight for. And those kind of affiliations, I would never, ever be a part of that. And he should disavow those immediately. For my part, let me be absolutely unequivocal. I fully support the LGBTQ community, and I'm going to make sure, just like for our entire community, that they have every opportunity to succeed and to flourish.
Thank you. That is all the time we have for questions tonight. So we will go to closing statements. You each have 3 minutes to present your closing statement. And candidate Yang Rohr, you will give yours first, please.
Thank you. Representing the 41st District and this community that made me who I am today has been absolutely the honor of a lifetime. It is a responsibility that I have taken incredibly seriously to make sure that I'm fulfilling my promise, the promise to our district that I would give a voice to them and represent us in Springfield. In the last 21 months that I have been in office, this is what we've done. I have passed a dozen pieces of legislation that have been signed into law, almost every single one of them with strong bipartisan support. We passed legislation that came from our high school students, from elementary school kids, from families that have been forever altered by the tragedy of the opioid epidemic. I brought $3.4 million in new capital funds directly into our district. We put money into making Naperville North safer. We put money into into renovating 9 playgrounds in the Indian Prairie 204 school district. We're going to be building an accessible new learning center in Wheaton Warrenville 200. We're funding our cultural institutions, and we're supporting projects for our firefighters. I have hosted almost 100 events during my time here. We've had 21 community coffees, 5 town halls, 28 newsletters. My office and we have knocked on almost every single knockable door in this district to make sure that you know how to contact me, and so that you know that I'm here for you and here to serve you. This election in this November, it is certainly about reproductive rights. It is absolutely about passing gun violence prevention and keeping our communities safe. For our district, it's also about radical transparency, radical accountability, and making sure that we're doing the work to represent our district and this community. I am so honored by those in our community who trusted in me 2 years ago to bring these changes and bring these results that you really wanted. I hope that for those that didn't vote for me, that you still felt and you know that your voice was heard and valued, and that you were always welcomed by me, my staff, to all of our events. I'm asking you once again for your vote tonight to continue this work. We may not agree on everything, but please know that I am always, always working on your behalf to move all of us forward.
Thank you. Candidate Janner, you have 3 minutes for your closing statement, please.
First of all, Carol, I'd like to once again thank you and everyone at the League of Women Voters for sponsoring this forum. I sincerely appreciate the fairness and professionalism that you brought to the forum, and especially appreciate the opportunity to interface directly with your members and members of the public. As stated previously, I firmly believe that my opponent is currently in office because she and her party hauled in over $3 million to win her seat in 2020. Again, take a moment to think about what someone can do with $3 million. We continue to see this with her barrage of nonsensical mailers and misleading TV commercials in the current election cycle. A significant amount of her campaign money comes from outside the district and from special interest groups that seek to buy her vote. These groups have been successful in doing so, as she has been a rubber stamp vote for her party bosses a very high percentage of the time. Pay for play, follow the money. This is Illinois politics under supermajority control, and my opponent is a cog in the wheel. My campaign sets up a clear choice for voters: business as usual, more of the same, or a fresh start. My election will bring back some balance to state government, along with a common sense approach. Illinois is a place where my grandparents chose, my parents grew up, and where I hope to continue to raise my own children. We are a state that is rich in history and tradition, a transportation nexus with 2 major airports. We are home to leading educational institutions, and as we approach Halloween, we are the leading producer of pumpkins in America. But the status quo is not working in Illinois. Don't take my word for it. Simply look at census data and the number of residents and businesses fleeing our state, including global brand names like Caterpillar with deep Midwestern roots and Boeing. Just yesterday, Tyson Foods announced 500 jobs are being moved out of Illinois. While the era of indicted Speaker Madigan is finally over, the culture persists with headline after headline about corruption in Illinois politics. I stand for public safety, supporting law enforcement, empowering parents, knocking down taxes and inflation, and a pro-business approach. Please visit richjanner.com to learn more about my campaign, and I hope I've earned your vote tonight on November 8th. Thank you.
Thank you both. Before we wrap up the forum tonight, we want to very much thank both candidates for your participation tonight. Without your willingness to appear and answer questions that inform the voters, forums like this could not take place. We also thank these 2 sponsoring chapters of the League in Naperville and Wheaton for putting this forum on tonight. For those of you who are watching, early voting has already begun. Please be sure to vote on or before November 8th. Thank you.